It was beyond my dreams. And not in the sense of like, oh, I had dreamt of this. It was actually beyond what I ever thought was possible. I think there's a huge gap in theatre where we're missing a texture, and I think circus can be part of that. There's 3 areas of my life that are important, and that's my personal life, my work, and travel.
Hello and welcome to the Theatre Art Life podcast, sponsored by Harlequin Floors, the world leader in floors, stage systems and studio equipment for the performing arts. Our podcast puts the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the world, the cultural creators, the backstage masters. My name is Anna Robb.
And my name is Anna Aguilera. Today we're talking to Sita Bhuller.
Born and bred in London, England, Sita has spent the last 15 years on the road as an acrobat and aerial artist. With a background in gymnastics and a degree in sports and exercise sciences, she fell into the world of performance by happy accident. Her first performance role was as stunt artist for Legoland in Windsor, England. Since then, she's travelled the world from Macau to Denmark, working with an array of stellar circus and aerial companies. Highlights include working with Franco Dragone Entertainment Group on The House of Dancing Water, a stint in Las Vegas on the Reve, a role on BBC One's professional gymnast television show Tumble, the Asian tour of Cavalia, Cirque du Soleil's world tour of Toruk, and most recently choreographing and directing the aerials and acrobatics for the Danish tour of Tarzan the musical. Sita is a trained yoga teacher and has undertaken a variety of roles throughout the years, from performer to choreographer, director, coach, and captain. She now finds herself playing mum on tour with Cirque du Soleil's Kurios, her partner Alex, who is a performer on the show, and their 2 sons, Kody and Otis. Sita, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's kind of funny hearing all of that stuff.
It's quite a resume of global work. It's amazing.
Wow. Right. Yeah.
I want to start with, you said that you fell into the world of performance from like a happy accident. So how did that happy accident take place? How did you get into all of this?
I had kind of left gymnastics and thought I was done with it, I guess, in my late teens. And then a guy I was dating, and he was a high-level gymnast. So it seemed like a usual route for him to go towards performing or more regular, whereas I was very kind of, I don't know, club level, pressing on national, but not high level at all. So I had left it behind and went to university and turned academic, and then trained occasionally on the weekends and coached gymnastics as my part-time job, and started to hang out with the guys who worked at Legoland Windsor in the stunt show, and they saw me training and persuaded me one night in a pub that I should audition. So that seemed like a good idea in the pub. And the next morning I was woken up pretty early and hungover and auditioned and got into the stunt show. So I ended up working there kind of as a backup or on-call artist whilst I was doing my degree, and drove back and forth from university to Legoland, learning these different roles and saying yes to everything. So often doing a day at Legoland and then going home and studying, going to a lecture in the morning and then driving in for the afternoon of shows, and that just started the ball rolling. Then my eyes were kind of open to a world of corporate shows and seeing Cirque du Soleil or Dragone as this kind of pedestal far away, but definitely learning about it more. Whereas before it was just kind of something you bought a ticket to. Whereas now it was friends of mine could say that they had been part of it, which was brand new to me.
And what were you doing on the stunt show? Like what was the act, the tricks that you had to do back then?
We dressed up as Lego characters, and I was a princess one year, and then I was an evil queen the next year, and it was on a lake, so it was freezing cold in the winter, which also put me into the struggles of being a performer straight from the beginning of like, if you want to do it, you just need to do it and get on with it kind of feeling. That was the schooling there. We had rehearsals in February, so it was ice cold on the lake, and there was icicles hanging from there was a tower in the center of the lake, which was 10 meters tall. So there was some diving from the tower, which I had never done. And I had one day to learn it at a swimming pool with one coach who was just kind of like, we need to get at least 2 dives today. So off you go, jump off. There was also a jet ski in the show. So I learned how to drive a jet ski and how to jump onto a jet ski whilst it was moving. But, you know, a show like this had maybe 1 week, 2 week rehearsal at max. And you needed to be able to do the skills within the first 2 days so that you could create the show. You couldn't take the 2 weeks to learn the skills. So it was very fast and quite a lot of tears in the beginning. I feel like I was overwhelmed with what I had taken on because it was just so far from what I was used to, with mats in a gym and a coach there to spot me. And suddenly I was amongst professionals. And also it was a cast who had done it for so many years that it was kind of like, oh, hurry up, newbie feeling. and that's hard to keep up with when you're 19.
But it never crossed your mind to just said, no, thanks, I'll go back just home and do my studies. You just
So many times.
And yet you kept doing it.
Yeah, I have, I guess I have an inner stubbornness that if I start something, I have to complete it. However many tears and insecurities I have, I'm extremely stubborn in that sense. And sometimes to my fault that perhaps I pushed too much. But this was definitely one of those instances where I was kind of feeling like, what am I doing and what for? Because I had started a degree and I was going on this path of academia and wanting to be a teacher or a psychologist in sport or anything I could really like grasp the idea of not stepping away from sports completely and wanting to be involved, but never physically involved. I wasn't the star gymnast. I wasn't the star in any sport, but I was just an all-rounder and enjoyed sports. Yeah.
That stubbornness took you to some of the best shows and best circus companies around the world, and not only a circus now, like also musicals.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. When I was at university, whilst I was at Legoland, I wanted to start training because I had stopped training maybe when I was 17, 16. And I needed to start again if I was going to do this show at Legoland. My skill level was acceptable, but if I wanted to go further, I needed to do more. And I didn't know any other way to do it than join a gymnastics club. And when you went to the university gymnastics, everyone's there like having fun and focused on the sports, drinking nights out and doing the skills that they already know rather than training further, or especially in the club that I was in. And so I found the Birmingham elite gymnasts who were training 3 or 4 times a week and were between the ages of 9 and 11. And I asked their coach if I could join them and train with them. So I would turn up after class and put my leotard on and go train with some 10-year-olds. And they thought it was bizarre and fun. And I guess their parents thought it was a little bit bizarre. But the coach enjoyed it because I was also closer to his age than the girls were. So also having another adult in the room and a different energy and a different focus. But I needed someone to push me and tell me what to do and also be available to spot me rather than sit on the floor and gossip for 2 hours and maybe do some skills. And of course, that's not everybody's university experience, but I needed something more structured so that I could really improve quickly to get where I was thinking of, or kind of, I had a hypothetical idea in my mind that I was trying to get to.
And so after that, you've headed into the world of, seriously into the world of performance. And so how did you, how was the process? Because a lot of people are like, well, how do we get into those shows? How do we get into working for Cirque du Soleil and all of these companies? So first of all, how did you do that? And also, what was it, those skills that you'd sort of cultivated that led you to be an employable person for these kind of companies, you think?
I really think I focused on being a good level at multiple disciplines. And I've always joked that I'm a jack of all trades and master of nothing. But I think that is a perfect way to sum up my skill set. Is I can dance, but I'm not a trained dancer. I can do high dive, but I'm not a high diver. I'm an aerialist, but I'm not a soloist. And I'm an acrobat because I was a gymnast. And I also trained gymnastics on a hard floor. So it wasn't a hard transition for me to go from the gymnastics I did as a child, whereas a lot of people are on sprung floors or air mats, and then they need to be able to do it on stage. And that's a whole nother thing, whereas I was used to that. So I had this ability to kind of click into anyone's idea. And I auditioned for Franco Dragone's House of Dancing Water whilst I was at university. And at that time, I was taking dance classes occasionally at the local club, or training gymnastics with these 10-year-olds, doing diving off a 10-meter tower in Legoland. And so I had a very good basic level on everything, but I wasn't great at anything. So I kind of had this ability to be molded by them. And nobody's ever confirmed this for me, but I see that as being why it worked. And then when I was employed and went to creation and trainings, then I could see that they were willing to give me a chance and to train me because I had a good basic level and a good foundation, rather than being somebody who had one amazing trick but couldn't really adapt to everything else. I was extremely adaptable and willing and a little bit daring to just have a go.
And I think, do you think that also circus shows, not only House Dancing Water, but now the other, Toruk and stuff, they've sort of melded into roles that are required for people to do multiple skills in one show, rather than specialist act, transition, specialist act, transition. That they want to have more generalists in the show that can do multiple things. Do you think that's the case?
I think so. And maybe it's because I have also been to those shows. Toruk was really a generalist show. Reve was also a generalist show, but also by Dragone. But I do think it's becoming a more common thing when I see people coming in now. And my feeling always has been, you have to be so incredible to get a solo. And everybody is focused on that. And yet you forget there's 30 people around those soloists who are doing just as much and are just as important and have just as many skills as that soloist does, and is probably more adaptable than the soloist is, because you've been asked to climb a Chinese pole and asked to do straps and asked to high dive and dance, and you miss that in a soloist. So I do think it's becoming more popular as a role in shows now. And perhaps people are going through that before they become a soloist, because it also gives you a huge amount of show experience and performance experience that I think shows are now expecting in a different way than before. The level has increased. Just, I would like to say my career has been short, but I am realizing slowly that it's been quite long now, that that in these last 15 years, the expectation is growing immensely of what is being expected of performers now compared to when I started. Especially to women, even. There is a difference in the corporate world, where it used to be this sense of silks was splits only, and on a extremely skinny, tall girl, and I didn't fit that mold. And now I see something completely different out there, which is brilliant. But it's an evolving art.
So what do you think are the skills or the skill set that a new artist would need today?
I think you need to be good on the ground and good in the air. And if you can swim, it's a plus. I feel like you need to be able to dance, and you need to be able to lift yourself and be lifted and have a good communication with a partner, because you may be a soloist, but then you may also be partnered with someone, and that's a whole nother way to work. You need to be able to listen to them without talking. You need to listen to each other's body language and listen to each other's cues, and not need a vocal cue to understand that you are starting something or you are in a rhythm. You need to be able to feel that, and that's often missed.
It's often missed, you said. You've had trouble working with some partners because they haven't had that intuition, or
often people who come from a sport that's individual, so artistic gymnasts miss that, or soloist dancers miss it, and not all dancers have done partner work, and it's a feeling that you need to connect with the person and trust them, and often you don't know them for very long, so it's not like you can hang out and see if you like the person before you start hanging from their arms and above great heights and want to ask them their morals. There's no time for that. You just need to feel connected from the second you climb up there. And sometimes it feels like, I don't know, you have these moments of like, I don't really know anything about this person, and yet I'm hanging here and we're counting to 3 or 5, 6, 7, 8, and I don't really know much more than their first name, and that we have this goal to train today, and I should just believe that you have the best intention, and we're going to try hard to complete a skill. It's a funny, like, it seems so normal in our world, and when I describe it to other people or to friends that are not performers, they look at me like, but you must have known them. But no, not really. And I haven't seen them since. What, so you just did that for like a day or for one show and you never talk again? Yeah.
You're trusting them with your life for an entire day, a complete stranger hanging upside down, and then you're like, see ya.
See ya. Maybe we see you again, maybe not sure.
It is bizarre when you put it that way. It really is.
Yeah.
I never.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you most of their second names. I don't know their surnames. Like you just go in and you ask if you can have a go sometimes, and they say, yeah, let's try this trick. Yeah, okay. It's a little bit forward.
Very interesting relationship. So what of all the projects that you've done, up until this point, what was the most fun? What was the most challenging? What sticks out for you?
I think the House of Dancing Water is definitely the biggest, I guess, monumental show for me. It was really at the beginning of my career. I was young and I was new to everything, completely naive and wide-eyed. I learned 90% of my skills there that I still carry today and use in all of my jobs. It was such a mixed cast from different countries and ages. It was also different experiences. Some people were brand new from gymnastics. Some people were brand new from circus. There were others who had been in the industry for years. So I was extremely impressionable and taking on so much information, I think. And I was just blown away with how much I was learning and what I was getting to do. Like, it was beyond my dreams. And not in the sense of like, oh, I had dreamt of this. It was actually beyond what I ever thought was possible. And then I was living it and just kind of going along with it without really checking in so often until after, and being surprised by what I had achieved and impressed, and still, like I said, still carrying all of those things with me.
It's funny about that because I think that a lot of people have expressed that post leaving the show, how much of a skill set builder that show was, because there was so many things in the show you were required to learn and participate in. And I don't think people didn't go into the show to like intentionally create this great training ground for people, but it did. Girls went off and did Red Bull cliff diving and all these skill sets that had been cultivated. It was a great training space for that kind of thing. And maybe just because also Macau was so isolated that you didn't have other social lives. Like if you lived in London or you lived in New York and you were doing that kind of show, you'd kind of be like, all right, check out of the show and off you go, right? And you'd go and have your life. But in Macau, there's not much that to do, so people would continue to train. They'd make other things. They'd learn from each other. It was just a community of people feeding off each other artistically, which I think also pushed people to grow and evolve.
For sure. I stayed in that rehearsal room until the lights automatically went off almost every night, training something. And then, I have training footage where the lights go off mid-flight. And that's just how I wanted it to be. I wanted to be there and I wanted to train hard. And like you said, there was nothing else. What else was I going to do? And you get sucked into this bubble of everybody is so driven there and focused on training. And I wouldn't say it was a competitive feeling, but it was definitely a motivated feeling, sometimes in a negative, but sometimes in a positive way. I feel like maybe at times it spiraled out of control for myself, where I didn't really know why I was training so hard, just that I should, and I was, and I kept going.
Like when you started at Legoland.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure, but I'm just doing it. Keep doing
it. And then you became a choreographer and a coach and a director. And how did that skill was building on itself and taking you to all those other positions?
I think whilst I was a performer, I've always been interested in what makes a complete image or a complete show. And it's not just about the acrobatics or just about the skill that you put on stage. And maybe that comes from that I wasn't actually presenting the best skill. Like I needed to very early on realize, how do you make the middle level skills look impressive? And artistry is a huge part of that. And lighting is a huge part of it, and music, and knowing how to use those to the best you can in that moment, which then made me more interested in lifting those points of a show, rather than always focusing on who was doing the triple or who was doing the biggest skill or the one arm, or that. Of course I find impressive, but I didn't find it interesting in the same way as I found people who were doing things that were simpler and more artistic, which then made my brain run and want to encourage that line rather than encouraging the elite within the industry. I'm also influenced a lot by my parents, who were both dancers, and my father, who is a director and choreographer himself in dance, and seeing kind of how I wanted to create images similar to what he had created on stage, but with a circus aspect to it, because I always hide away from the ta-da of circus, and I want to put more emotion into it, or as I describe to people in especially in theatre, is okay, you have a scene, but I would like to add some texture to it. And for me, the texture is the lighting and the music, but you're all standing on the ground singing a song in a musical. And why isn't there somebody mirroring the feeling or the words in the air, or the dynamics? If it's a dance choreography, why aren't we mirroring the dynamics by having some bungee or some wall bounce or whatever apparatus that we have access to? I think there's a whole nother dimension that we can tap into that often isn't, because we are thinking of circus as ta-da and or we need to see an elite triple. And I don't think that's where it should be used necessarily all the time. I think there's a huge gap in theatre where we're missing a texture, and I think circus can be part of that.
And now a moment for our sponsor. The Theatre Art Life podcast is proud to be sponsored by Harlequin. Harlequin is the world leader in floors, stage systems and studio equipment for the performing arts. Established in the UK over 40 years ago, Harlequin is the preferred performance floor for the world's most prestigious dance and performing arts companies, theatres and schools. From the Royal Opera House to the Bolshoi Theatre, the New York City Ballet to the Royal New Zealand Ballet. Harlequin's experience and reputation are founded on the development, manufacture and supply of a range of high-quality sprung and vinyl floors specifically designed for dance and the performing arts. Backed by an engineering team and independent research, Harlequin also designs, builds and refurbishes stages, working with stage engineers and theatre consultants in leading venues across the world. Harlequin is the global leader in its field with offices in Europe, the Americas and Asia Pacific. Find out more at harlequinfloors.com, HARLEQUIN floors.com. And is that what you did with Tarzan the musical? I mean, how did that role manifest, and what kind of circus aspects were incorporated into that?
It was actually a collaboration with another choreographer from Denmark, Crystal Stjerneberg, who brought me in to help so that we could share the role. And she is Danish, and she was already in talks with the musical and producing it, and I came in to share the role in adding different textures and choreographing the aerial acts and numbers for the show. And the theatre company was very, I guess, forward thinking in the sense that aerial and acrobatics isn't seen so much in Denmark past the gymnastics world. And I'm very new to it there, but there is a big hole in theatre. And I think this was the theatre that was willing to invest money into aerial and acrobatics. And since Corona, of course, there's been a huge pullback, which is a shame, but totally understandable. So I hope it comes back in theatres there, because I think it was a big leap for that theatre to do it. And maybe Tarzan's a little bit of a obvious musical for it to be used, but I think, you know, it was also my intention that it wasn't used only as a showpiece. It was also used in a artistic or in a feeling kind of way. So there were pieces in the musical that didn't lend itself to an applause. Like the music just continued and the audience would sit there and kind of be like, I'm not sure what I just saw, but there were people hanging there and now they're gone. And for me, that was one of the most beautiful parts of the show, is it just happened and no one really could put their finger on it. And they probably don't remember it as such, but they remember an extremely sad moment and an extremely heavy moment. And that heaviness came from people hanging over their heads also. So it added a layer that I think it's nice that they can't pinpoint, because they can't say, oh, someone did this amazing trick above my head. They didn't, but they added something that made them feel something different.
I find that very beautiful. I do think that contemporary circus is getting there, though. It's really working into that blend of more theatricality with circus and finding or developing a language.
Yeah, I really like that.
I think it's like they're trying that, but they're still hanging on to the elite level. I feel like it feels more natural from what you're doing, Sita, is that you bring those circus elements into the theatrical thing and help tell the story. Whereas to shift the beast that is the ta-da circus into that is a harder trajectory, right? Because all the people that come from that world don't necessarily come from that deep-seated theatrical world either, right? So I still think there's a path. Maybe sort of House of Dancing Water found its way to a certain extent of that narrative storytelling within it. I still think there could have been more. I mean, you can never explain the motorbikes, no matter how hard you try.
No. And then they were there.
Yeah. I mean, I have a goal of like trying to start a circus show starting with the story, not trying to wrap a story around a bunch of acts, right? And then choose the acts based on what story you want to tell and not the other way around. And the default of most people in the circus thing is to do it in the reverse. I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd like to see it move in that direction.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm interested in, is speaking to directors once they have a show. Like, I really don't have the interest to direct my own show. I personally don't want that responsibility. And I'm not really interested in building it. I'm more interested in this thing of finding a show that has an interesting story and then being able to add something to it, because nobody has thought of it in that way. Of course, in theatre, the go-to is put dancers on the stage. But why are we hiring 10 dancers and not 5 dancers and 5 aerialists? Or even 10 dancer aerial acrobats who can do multiple disciplines and change the dimensions in the theatre space, rather than everything being on the floor. Why does it need to be on the floor? Who said dancing on the floor makes more sense than dancing in the air in a random musical? Like, some of the dance numbers in musicals come out of nowhere with no logical explanation. But then suddenly when you say we should put them in the air, they go, well, that doesn't make sense. Oh, it doesn't?
But that random dance number you just did out of nowhere.
Yeah. I don't know why those girls just ran out in skirts and started doing the can-can, but no, for sure. Aerial would be totally weird.
I love it because it's kind of challenging the accepted, and I love the blending, right? Because there's like, okay, the Broadway show, this is the formula, don't break it.
Yeah,
and
don't break it.
Yeah, and I think that's also, it's interesting because they have done a lot of ambitious stuff on Broadway. Be it, what is that, the gorilla one, King Kong, and Spider-Man, and all of these sort of things. So, but it's starting small, like, you know, just like you said, just to supplement a little bit would be a good way to sort of to move that needle a little bit, I think.
And often, like, I guess I often think, you know, or I've also seen that when shows are trying to move in that direction, perhaps they get this idea that, like, yeah, let's go for the aerial number and then they don't hire the right person to create it, and they let the director do it. And no fault of their own, but they don't have the experience with it. And then I've often watched shows and then just felt like, oh my God, there was so much potential. And then I just leave frustrated because I know that they haven't hired anyone who could think outside the box a little bit. And that's perhaps where I wish circus would kind of merge into theatres more, or theatres would want to pull circus in without the fear that it's going to turn to da. And someone's going to start, you know, jumping across the stage and pausing for applause. And I don't think that's the way to go.
I love it. I think you got to do more of that. I'm in.
Like, yeah. Okay.
What about you, Anna?
I love it too. Totally. Yeah. It asks for much more of like an artistic conception and work, and I don't know. I don't think just artistic, but the thought process and the creative process is different, and it can be a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Sita. I think with Sita, it all comes down to the right team and the right people chosen to it. Because there's one thing in terms of having those ideas of, I want to put people in the air and whatever, but how many times have you seen in no, but the thing, yeah, if you have, everyone has those ideas, but if you're not bringing the right people to make that combustion take place properly, then all of those ideas will fall flat. So it's always about the people, really, isn't it? Always.
Yeah. And there's the battle of the egos. Like, do the dancers take center stage, and does the aerial need to be in the spotlight in the center? And like, I really think that each number in a show or each scene in the show needs to, you don't need to fight for the spotlight. Like, I like the idea that aerial and acrobatics can be an echo of something, so it doesn't need to be center stage, but it just adds to something. I don't know. I guess I did one opera once where I was climbing a rope in the background, and one of the singers said to me, well, you have an interesting way of doing backting. And that was their way of saying that you have to have your back to the audience whilst acting and singing. And I was climbing a rope, and he thought that was very interesting.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that term, backting. I love it.
So I think we should all be better at backting.
That's amazing. So you now have 2 kids and you're on tour with your partner, and so that's got to be insane, that life. How is it? What's going on?
I don't know yet. It's so new. We Alex, my partner, he left 2 months ago for training for Kurios in Montreal, and we went back and forth over the idea of should we come with him, and we, meaning me and the boys, and we finally decided no, because Montreal is cold and I hate the cold, and having 2 babies under 2 I didn't see as being so much fun with trying to get outside, and with COVID rules we weren't really supposed to stay together, and long training hours, and it didn't really make sense to leave straight away. So we roped my mum into coming to stay with me and help out in Denmark, which is also a weird thing to be in a country that you don't really have a connection to other than through your partner, to suddenly find yourself living there. But I mean, I had some work and I have a few friends that I really enjoy, so we made the most of it, but it is a weird feeling to be placed somewhere. And then we have joined Alex on tour when they arrived in Toronto. It's still cold, but we are here, and they are staging the show right now, so it's pretty long hours. I don't know, having 2 babies is having 2 babies. They make a lot of noise. I don't have so much time for myself. My mum helps a lot. Alex helps a lot when he's home. We're trying to figure out a new rhythm of how he can be connected enough with the boys and dedicated to work, and also how can I have some separation from the boys and be dedicated to them. So we have, like, you know, two different agendas with having children. I need to have my space from them and be able to find out, am I keeping all of my hours for them, or do I want to pursue some kind of career alongside, whether it part-time or full-time? And also for him, how does he have this full-time job as a performer and still have a relationship with his boys? After having 2 months away from them, also takes time to reconnect and feel each other out. You know, it's not as quick as being like, oh my God, I missed you so much.
Yeah, because the kids are like, where have you been? I know that feeling. I've been away from my kids for months at a time as well. And it's really I read something in a book that was really kind of, or an article. It was quite, I was always coming back, and you have that period of adjustment to go back at home, right? And when you come home from a travel for like 2 months or 3 months, and you're finding that. And I read this article, is like, don't forget that your family has to adjust to you being back. And I'd never really considered that it was their adjustment as well, because I was like, well, they've been in the routine, but I've been absent for so long and I'm a big part of their lives. And then suddenly I'm back. And that just changed the way that you got to be gentle in your approach with the kids and let them find their adjustment back to you when, and I think that's more important when they're younger. I think as they're older, they're a bit more cognizant of what's going on and why. Yeah. But you definitely felt like, it's like, run into my arms. Oh, you're not interested.
Yeah, and you want this like overwhelming feel of love and missing each other, and they're kind of like, hi. and I mean, with a 4-month, almost 5-month-old baby, like, they change. What settles him now isn't what settled him 2 months ago, or, you know, the rhythm that he's in, and feeding times and sleeping patterns changes so often. So it's also a whole thing of learning, and who do you pass off to? Because now I've been independent with them for a couple of months. It's very easy for me to just get on with things. and when do I pass it off, and how do you feel to be like, can you do this? Like, I've never had to ask him before, can you do this? Because we've been completely in line in our rhythms, and now I need to give permission in some way, and not explicitly, but also in myself, like, Sita, sit down, you're fine. Let him go do something. Like, you stop jumping up every time. You're not alone in the room anymore. So, like you said, it is an adjustment on both sides, for sure.
I mean, it's got to be quite complex to try and get work for you wrapped into all of that right now with 2 kids under 2, right? So for now, just mum.
Just mum. I'm talking to a couple of circus schools about teaching workshops or covering when they ask if I want regular classes. I say no, because I don't want the responsibility, but I like the idea of they could call and I can say yes or no at any given time. It's great having my mum here. I've also spoken to a lot of the other mums on tour who, in similar positions, would like to go and do things. So how do we share the load, and can we get to know each other's kids enough that we can start to babysit and take on some responsibility for each other? That would be nice. But as far as like pursuing anything full-time or big projects, I'm not hunting for it. And if something lands in my lap, then we would have to rethink it all and see where we stand with it. You know, it's a different thing when now we know we can be apart for 2 months and survive. It's also something, if something comes up that is 6 weeks, we can figure it out. It might not be ideal, but you know, you weigh out
pros and cons.
Yeah, and who gains what, and what is the end goal, and how does this affect the children? Because of course, having them as calm and settled in an unsettled environment is important.
Yeah. And so how long is the tour? It's in tour, right? So how long is it you in Toronto?
Yeah, we're here for 4 months, which for me feels like a permanent base. It's 3 months in each city, but we have staging here, so that's why it's a little bit longer. For me, it feels permanent. And then we will move to another permanent place. I have been on tour for so long that the longest I've ever lived anywhere as an adult has been Macau. And that was when I was between the ages of 22 and 25, almost 10 years ago, 27. So since then, I've been moving all over the place and never really lived anywhere for longer than 6 months. Corona was the first time I lived somewhere and unpacked. And even in that time, we managed to unpack and pack quite a few times and move houses and travel around a bit. But we stayed in the same country, at least. But
you're a gypsy, Sita. You're a gypsy.
Yeah, pretty much. And I like it. And we were so ready to get out and move when this opportunity came up. You know, even with 2 kids, our 2 Corona babies, we packed them up and brought them along.
That's amazing.
So from all things you've mentioned, or maybe not, what's the thing you like the most about your job?
The ability to move around and explore different places. I've kind of always had this idea that there's 3 areas of my life that are important, and that's my personal life, my work, and travel. And as long as 2 boxes can be ticked, then I'm good. And if all 3 can be ticked, I'm great. And for the moment, work is not being ticked, but personal and travel is being ticked. So I'm very good. And I guess now that as we are a family unit, it's not just me and my work, but it's my partner's work. So that box gets ticked. So we are doing extremely well right now with the decision that we've made to be here.
Amazing. And if there was one thing that you could change about the job or the industry, you kind of might have mentioned it about adding texture to musicals theatre, but is there anything else that you would like to change about your job or industry? What would it be?
I find this really hard. We were thinking about this, and I feel like so many changes are very individual to a show or a circumstance. And I guess the feeling I have now is I would like more support for families so that it feels like a realistic option to continue in performing. At the moment, I'm surrounded by a lot of women and mothers who are performing or following the tour with their partner. But I also have so many friends who are at home who have stopped because they wanted to become a mother. And I think that also ties into the idea of how long often women wait to have children when they are performers, because it kind of marks an end. And even for myself, I have waited many years to become a mother because I needed in myself to know that I was okay not going back to performing. And if I didn't have that feeling, and maybe that, like, of course that was a personal thing, of course I could have changed it, but perhaps there's a perception in the workplace and a perception in the culture of it, of like, once you have kids, you're done. And I don't think it's a fault of generations before us, but it's something that if there was support of seeing other families doing the same and women coming back without having to rush to get back. It's been a huge learning experience in Denmark, where it's a very acceptable thing that women are on maternity leave for 1 year. And I came from performing where we were expected to be back in shows in 3 months. So my whole mind was blown when I heard that. And when people would ask me, so my friends outside of Denmark would ask me, so when are you going back to work 2 months after having a baby? And I'd be kind of like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it, because I was in Denmark where everyone was not asking me at all about work. They were just like, oh, you're on Basel, which means you're on maternity leave, which also had this kind of weird feeling of like, that was all I was. I was only maternity leave, and they weren't interested in what I do or what my work was. You immediately lost that and just became maternity leave for a year plus. And then everybody outside of that was like, but you should be doing something. So I was kind of in this in between, like, but I deserve maternity leave, but I should be working, but I deserve, but I. So I think finding some kind of happy medium between that, of it being normal that you come back to work in circus, but maybe not after 3 months, because that's just crazy. That's a whole thing that I have so much admiration to other women who have done that. That's crazy. I'm not ready right now, and I had my baby 4.5 months ago. There's no way that I would be stepping on stage at this moment.
Yeah,
but the pressure that you feel is intense.
Oh, I can imagine, and especially because, I mean, other people I know have done it, but they've been in the backstage roles and stuff like that. When you've got to be on a role, that when you've got your body is part of your tool for work, I mean, that's just another whole level of pressure, right? To get back into a condition that you're able to perform safely on stage is a big part of that.
Yeah. Before my 2 boys, I had a very late miscarriage. So in 2018, I had actually left tour. I was with Cirque du Soleil on Toruk, and I had left tour at maybe 10 or 11 weeks pregnant, but we lost the baby around 5 months. So I had also gone through this process of changing, not career, but accepting that my career as a performer could be done. And then when we lost the baby, it was a whole nother recovery, not just physically, because I had also not performed for a few months and was thoroughly enjoying being pregnant, but the emotional trauma and recovery from that, not only having to give birth, but to then decide, like, oh, do I just step back into my role that I had left when I was pregnant? And that was another process, not just physically, but mentally. But I didn't know what else to do other than go back to performing. So I kicked my butt back into shape and kept going.
That stubbornness of Sita kicked in, and she went back to work.
Exactly. And then I went back to work, and then we kept trying for babies, and but it was that was also like a whole thing that maybe, or that could have been supported more, in the sense of like not feeling like I need to do it now. otherwise I'm going to lose the opportunity. And I think that's often the sense that many women have. If they do this, they're going to lose.
That's why we need more women in leadership positions, because they will have generally understood or can understand people going through situations like that in their personal lives. I think there's a lot to be said about empathy and care and attention for, working mums and people who want to have families. I totally agree. I mean, that's not just, I don't think that's isolated to the performance world. I think that's across the board, really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think, and that was also a different experience being in Denmark, where it is more respected or more encouraged. And of course, they have their own issues. Yeah, and honored exactly that I was still working whilst pregnant with Kody, the oldest, and given the support and encouraged to take time if I needed, although I didn't, but it was there and presented and said. Also, when we spoke about future shows that I would be involved in, it was always encouraging that it's fine that the baby is there. It's fine that you need to feed. It's fine that you need to take some time and we'll work around you. Whereas I don't feel like that could be the case if I went into some other companies. It would kind of be like, you need to find some care for the child. You need to be in during these times. No children on site, no flexibility, because they have such a rigid schedule. And that rigidity, it's what makes it difficult to ever imagine being a mother, because you don't have, you are on baby call all the time. I speak to you now and my phone is still next to me just in case. And at any moment a baby could come in and need feeding. So it's this feeling. And of course I don't expect that if I was to perform a show. But all the times around the crucial time of being on stage, there needs to be a little bit more flexibility allowed. So I guess that's what I would change.
Amazing. Thank you, Sita, so much for joining us on Theatre Art Life today. So good to see you and sharing your stories. It's really, truly amazing.
You too, Anna. Thank you.
Theatre Art Life is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theatreartlife.com.